Warning: the following episode contains elements of horror that may be unsuitable for listeners under the age of 13. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to Beyond the Bizarre, 7 Nights of Terror.
Hey everybody, welcome to the first night of our 7 Nights of Terror, our Beyond the Bizarre Halloween special for our season 2. Halloween is like my second favorite time of the year aside from the Christmas holiday, but Halloween comes in at a very close second. Because it's just, a spooky time of year. Our favorite Halloween movies, favorite Halloween TV specials are on air. It's just a very, very magical time, in my opinion. And of course, it's the perfect time of year to have a podcast such as Beyond the Bizarre. Because what makes Halloween Halloween if it's not ghost stories, urban legends, and just bizarre things in general? And speaking of urban legends, for tonight's episode, I have 2 urban legends from the state of Alabama in the United States. So I grew up in the southern part of the United States, and one thing I can say about growing up in the South in the U.S. is that there are so many urban legends and ghost stories and lore. I'm not saying that the South is more superstitious than the other parts of the country. It's just many of the more popular ghost stories and urban legends come from the most southern states. And I guess it probably has a lot to do with the sordid history of the South. There's a lot of history, death, just tragedy, things that, kind of breed hauntings and urban legends and lore. So that probably has a lot to do with it. And speaking of death, our first urban legend I'm going to share with you guys comes from the city of Huntsville, Alabama. And I don't know if I would call it an urban legend, but it does have a lot of rumors circulating around this place, and it's called the Dead Children's Playground. Once again, the Dead Children's Playground is located in Huntsville, Alabama. It's actually beside the historical cemetery, Maple Hill Cemetery, which happens to be the largest and the oldest cemetery in the state of Alabama. The cemetery was founded in 1822 and holds over 80,000 graves. That's a lot. So in the year 2007, Maple Hill Cemetery began to run out of room for burials, so some city officials decided to raise the original playground to make room for more burial plots. So that means that they just teared it down, to make room for more graves. But this decision did not make locals happy. The decision was met with outrage from the officials, and the city decided to make a new playground beside Maple Hill Cemetery. The new playground, which still stands today, has been dubbed Dead Children's Playground by the locals. The legend of the Dead Children's Playground centers on the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. It is said that many children who died in the city of Huntsville from the deadly flu are buried in Maple Hill Cemetery. According to legend, the spirits of these children come out after nightfall and play in the park as if they are still living. Dead Children's Playground looks like a regular, standard playground, complete with swing set, slide, and jungle gym, but images of the playground online show something else, otherworldly. Locals have also reported the swings swaying by themselves, and even full-blown specters of children have been spotted by locals, usually after midnight, accompanied by the laughter of children. Looking at some of the images online, you can see unexplained orbs and shadows in these pictures. These are said to be the spirits of the children. The Spanish flu killed not only children but many adults as well. An estimated 50 million people succumbed to the flu worldwide. The city of Huntsville, Alabama was one of the cities hit the hardest. Hospitals were full to capacity and doctors worked tirelessly to bring comfort and care to patients. To prevent the spread of the Spanish flu, patients were treated at home, which resulted in the flu spreading through and wiping out entire households. The bodies of the dead were then stacked onto wagons and carried to the morgues by horses. As an effort to caution their children and prevent the spread of the disease, parents would sing a rhyme to their children to remind them to keep their windows closed. The rhyme went like this: I had a bird. Its name was Enza. I opened the window, and in fluenza. That's clever, I can't lie. That's clever wordplay. Per the Alabama Department of Health, the Spanish flu arrived in Huntsville on September 25, 1918. It only took about 10 days to spread to the general population. By October 7th, all public places, including schools, stores, and churches, were closed. By October 13th, there was only one local pharmacist and one local doctor that remained uninfected by the deadly flu. So that leaves the question, how many children haunt the playground? There is no official account of the number of children that had died from the Spanish flu, or how many of these children were buried in the adjoining Maple Hill Cemetery, but one thing is for sure, there had to have been many, possibly in the hundreds. But prior to becoming a playground, the grounds was originally a limestone quarry, which had soon turned into a landfill of flowers, bushes, and trees. In the year of 1960, there were numerous reportings of missing children's cases in the city of Huntsville. It was suspected that an unknown person from the neighborhood were abducting and killing the children. One day, a local was walking through the abandoned quarries and found a small skull. This led to the recovery of several skeletons and the discovery of small corpses for more recent murders. Unfortunately, the murderer was not found, but it was discovered that the children were murdered brutally. There were signs of prolonged abuse and detainment present as well on the recently deceased. The bodies had signs of malnourishment and wounds that were partially healed. This case remains unsolved to this day, and with the discovery of all the bodies, the murders stopped. Many of the victims were local children and were buried in Maple Hill Cemetery. If you are bold enough and decide to visit Dead Children's Playground at night, it is located at the end of Newport Drive, just off McClung Avenue Southeast. You can search Google Maps using the term Dead Children's Playground. To access through the cemetery, park near Section 40 and walk up the hill. You will see a pavilion, and the park is located to the left. Per locals, the spirits of the children are said to be very active on the grounds between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So this history of the Dead Children's Playground is very interesting to me because, there's, of course, the Spanish flu was something that actually happened. The whole world knows that it happened. And so some of the kids that are haunting or said to haunt this property, this playground, may be the spirits of the children that died from the Spanish flu, or it could be the spirits of the kids who were unfortunately brutally murdered. So, or it can be a mix of both. Like, I don't know about you guys, but this is how my brain works. I'm just picturing kids from the early 1900s, playing with kids from the 1960s, just imagine just the time difference on technology, train of thought, all of that. Just imagine if they are playing together, the stories that they may share, amongst one another. It's rather interesting, but that just could be just how my brain works, I guess. Another thing that I found interesting was the fact that you can look it up, using the search term Dead Children's Playground on Google Maps. Since it's said to be a local name, but since you can look it up, using, Dead Children's Playground on Google Maps. It may just be more of a centric name for like everyone knows it by that. Everyone knows that playground by that actual name. So it kind of shows the power of urban legends and lore. The Dead Children's Playground would be, I feel, an ideal place to, visit on Halloween or around Halloween. Since it's such a vast spread urban legend and it has roots in history such as the Spanish flu pandemic, it has roots there and possibly ties to a cold case, unsolved murder, series of murders I should say. So it's kind of like the perfect little late night adventure if you're feeling brave or adventurous. You can spend the night in the adjoining cemetery. I probably should have looked up and researched to see if there were any type of hauntings in the adjoining cemetery, the Maple Hill Cemetery, which there probably is, but I didn't really get into that because I was more so engrossed in the whole lore surrounding the Dead Children's Playground. But who knows, Ghosts of Maple Hill Cemetery may be a future episode on Beyond the Bizarre. But yeah, it'll be a perfect little late night Halloween adventure, creep through the cemetery, see if you can spot any ghost children in Dead Children's Playground. But if you're not feeling that adventurous or want something a little more tame, there is another urban legend that hails from the state of Alabama called the Legend of Huggin Molly. So the Legend of Huggin Molly originated in Abbeville, Alabama, which is about 5 hours south of Huntsville, where Dead Children's Playground is located. So from what I've researched, Huggin Molly is kind of one of those stories that parents kind of tell their kids to keep them in line. So it's a story that parents would tell their kids to kind of deter them from staying out too late. Most of the locals in Abbeville are familiar with the Legend of Huggin Molly, as everyone grew up being told the same story. And as for the legend itself, there are two versions of the Huggin Molly legend. The first version claims that Huggin Molly is the ghost of a woman who had lost her infant child and dealt with the grief and tragedy of losing her child by hugging local children. The second version claims that Huggin Molly was a professor at the Southeast Alabama Agricultural School who was trying to keep students safe by keeping them off the streets at night. It seems innocent enough, right? But what makes Huggin Molly so frightening is that she is described as wearing all black and standing 7 feet tall. Some have even described her as being a larger woman. She is known to not only chase down children and squeeze them in an embrace, but she also screams in the child's ear, sometimes even drawing blood. So this is from what's being described, a burly 7 foot tall woman in all black. She's also described as sometimes having on a white brim hat, chasing kids down, squeezing them in an embrace, and screaming in their ears. So you can see how that would be frightening to a child. To put it into perspective, that's kind of like, having Shaquille O'Neal wearing all black and chasing you down. Like, that's how big this woman is. That is per some accounts. Some accounts say she's a larger woman. Some accounts say she's not, she is 7 foot tall, but not on the larger side. So I guess it's just whichever urban legend that you grew up hearing, or whichever one that you believe in. But the central theme of Huggin Molly, I find, is kind of light. It seems like, that she lost her child. Well, the first legend states that she lost her child, and she's, hugging local children to deal with that. I mean, that's kind of like maybe creepy, but it's more like she's trying to, prevent kids from dying the way that her child did. Same thing with the whole college professor thing. She's trying to protect college students, so it seems more of like a protective measure. But I'm not gonna say in hindsight, but I can kind of see from kids' perspective how it would be frightening. One thing about Southern urban legends is that they do carry a lot of weight, I find, especially being from the South. And the legend of Huggin Molly is absolutely no exception. This legend has served as inspiration for the local Abbeville eatery by the same name. Huggin Molly's is a 50s styles diner, complete with a soda fountain and nifty lunches and dinner specials. And the founder was inspired by the legend of Huggin Molly after hearing it so many times growing up and actually knowing someone that had a true encounter with Huggin Molly. But it seems that Huggin Molly usually only lurks out when kids are out past their curfew, past bedtime, so at nightfall, or if college students are out late and there's no one else around, it's just them. So she's kind of a protector of sorts. But I'm sure in the city of Abbeville on Halloween, when all the kids, are out trick-or-treating, they'd be sure to be home at curfew so they don't run into Huggin Molly. The Legend of Huggin Molly I hadn't heard until I started doing research for the Halloween special. And I think it's really cool. Like I said, the South has so many nifty urban legends, based on city, based on locale. And I think this is a really cool legend because it's just frightening enough. But like, so you can also kind of see like the positive side of it, where she's kind of meaning to protect, but is also frightening as well. So like I said, she's kind of the perfect story for parents to tell their children, to keep them in line and having them be mindful not to stay out too late. I found that back in that time, there were so many stories that parents would make up. Parents would make up to kind of frighten their children to kind of stay in line. But I wonder how many of these are centered in truth. Like I've always said, I believe urban legends and lore, a lot of them are rooted in truth, have some type of fact behind them. Such as, the Dead Children's Playground with the Spanish flu, and, with Huggin Molly, like, there may be some type of truth to her. Maybe she lost a child, maybe even a college-aged student or college-aged child. Maybe like a little blend of both, that kind of got split into two legends. Well, two different versions of the legend. By the way, I think it's a really, really cute legend, especially with the diner named after it. I think that's really a cute touch of it, and it just shows how the locals really embrace the story of Huggin Molly. And that's what I find that's so beautiful about urban legends and lore and just ghost stories in general, that they're passed down and they're embraced and they just really become a part of the culture. And it's a wonderful thing, especially during this spooky time of the year. And of course, spooky is what we do best here at Beyond the Bizarre podcast. And we are here for the next 6 nights of our Terror Fest, our 7 nights of terror. We'll be back tomorrow with a whole new episode and more frights for you guys. So come back tomorrow. Until then, stay bizarre. Good night.